the Vatican has dealt with strange lore from down through the ages, put that all on file, and so it's not a surprise to me that the Vatican, European governments, perhaps even the United States, have arrived at the point where they believe now it's time to ask the big question. What's going on in our atmosphere? Because they're literally an ages-long record of visitors from perhaps another dimension, but now the popular belief is from the stars, visitors from other galaxies, perhaps other planets, who have come to Earth on a mission. And the Vatican has begun to ask the question, what mission exactly are they on? How should we relate to these visitors, and should we regard them seriously? Do they have something they can teach us? Should we teach them something? In other words, the Vatican, as well as some of the governments around the world, the Vatican seems to be preparing for a meeting of some sort, and I frankly believe that meeting is going to happen.
Now, you talk about the X-Files out of Britain. We interviewed Nick Pope a couple of nights ago, former lead investigator for the British Mod, on those X-Files, and for the first time we got Nick to admit this might be supernatural as opposed to a physical manifestation. But let's get specifically to your research. And in fact, in this month's edition of Prophecy in the News magazine on this question of the Vatican, there's a feature article by you. It has a picture of the Pope standing next to an alien. And part of the caption says that while the Pope probably didn't actually meet with this nasty-looking creature, the Vatican does seem to be preparing their adherents to welcome Earth's space brothers. Let's talk about that, beginning with the question, what are the spiritual issues that are raised by space aliens?
Well, we have an Associated Press article headline, E.T. Phone Rome, which is a little humorous touch, but the article talks about the questions of life's origin, whether life exists elsewhere in the universe, and the Reverend Jose Gabriel Funes, who is director of the Vatican Observatory, presented last November in a 5-day conference. He presented arguments in favor of the presence of ETs, and basically was campaigning for a meeting between humans and extraterrestrials. And I'm going to just read a quote here. Funes said the possibility of alien life raises many philosophical and theological implications, but he added that the gathering was mainly focused on the scientific perspective and how different disciplines can be used to explore the issue. So here we have a marriage, if you will, of what has classically been called religion and science. And it's fascinating that we live in a time when the popular science and the popular religious ideas are coming together. Now, ETs. What do you think of when you think of ETs? Well, you might think of a lizard. You might think of a little gray alien with the big black eyes. You might think of some kind of a praying mantis-looking creature. You might think of a very tall, beautiful, blonde-headed Nordic type. All of these are rich in UFO lore from ancient history. But let's get the Vatican in here, because we have Gabriel Funes' own probing question in the matter. Did the aliens experience their own version of original sin, and if not, what kind of creatures are they? Imagine that. The Vatican, of course, is built around the idea of original sin and the need for redemption, which is the central Christian idea. What if aliens came here who never experienced original sin? That's the question that's being asked. Should we regard them as perhaps mentors, come here to help us out of our human condition? So I think, Tom, that's the question that the Vatican is concerned with. Really, they're concerned with the idea of sin on planet Earth. They're almost looking to the aliens to be able to answer some questions for them.
And you know what's interesting about this, when you're talking about Father Gabriel Funes, and I kind of remember parts of that, where he was actually indicating that if they came here without original sin, then therefore they would be morally spiritually superior to us. So your word mentor takes on an entirely different kind of meaning. I also noticed that it isn't just for those people listening to this show that are not familiar with what the Vatican's been doing in the last 24 months. Funes was just the latest. You've got Corrado Balducci out there, who a few years ago said that the aliens are already here, in contact with the Earth, and that the Vatican is aware of it. Nick Pope said he knows Corrado Balducci personally and believes that he is very, very sincere about that, being honest at least in his own understanding. Guy Cosmonalgo, a couple years ago, wrote his Alien Life or Intelligent Life in the Universe. Yeah, I mean, this really, we could probably do a whole show just on this one question. What in the world is the Vatican really insinuating here about these things being morally superior to us, outside of the sin question?
Well, it's fascinating. Redemption, we believe, it really is the central issue of the Christian faith. Redemption came through Christ. Now, the Bible depicts Christ's incarnation as a unique event, once for all time, and that is so emphatic in Scripture, I don't even think I need to repeat it. Christ's incarnation didn't happen anywhere else, and I think if it had, we'd probably be told about it. But the cross of Christ, and here I'm going to get into a term that some people may say, well, what's this doing in relation to ETs? Well, the cross of Christ redeemed the broken universe. So says Scripture. And the fact that it went beyond this earth, that is, the finished work of Christ, was universal in nature. That being the case, if it was a solitary event in time, never to be repeated, then Gabriel Funes has a problem. His assumption goes out into among all the galaxies and says, well, Christ's redemption didn't reach that far, or did it? We've got that question. How do you react to that fundamental question?
Excuse me. I wanted to ask, does the Bible even support the idea of ETs from other worlds?
Actually, it supports the idea of ETs. And, of course, that's the term extraterrestrial, meaning outside this planet. But some have suggested that that's not a very good term. Maybe UT would be a better term, ultra-terrestrials. And that's been used in the past. Ultra meaning from beyond, which would take in travel between dimensions. Now, and there we get into a biblical idea. Earth being one dimension, and then a dimension just beyond human sight being another dimension. And so if we call these visitors ultra-terrestrial, suddenly we're in the pages of Scripture, because the Bible is absolutely full of events about creatures, events involving creatures who suddenly appear, and they're among us, and then they disappear. In fact, all of secular literature, you go back in history, the Romans, the Greeks, they all talk about these strange visitors.
One of the questions that several of the people that we've talked to this week, especially the ones that have their scholarship in biblical studies, have raised this question about whether angels would actually need or use celestial transportation vehicles, what people are commonly calling UFOs, I suppose. What is your take on that?
Well, my take on it is that indeed they do. They are commonly referred to in the Old Testament as chariots. I remember the Old Testament story of Elisha and his servant, who were surrounded by the enemy, and Elisha opened the servant's eyes to the fact that, hey, there are the chariots of God all around us. Now, chariot, in the Hebrew, Merkavah, the chariot is a flying vehicle, sometimes visible to human eyes, sometimes not. And it perfectly fits the idea of what we have come to call a UFO. And I believe, quite frankly, Tom, that UFOs are in two categories.